Right, this is me in my first minute of the exam, and I'm just reacting to the image. I'm spotting things that jump out at me. Remember, I only need 6. Those are for my 2 zoom outs, the one at the beginning and the one at the end, and for my 3 zoom ins. So I don't have to overload my image with loads of notes, and I don't have to worry about whether any of these notes are any good. I'm just welcoming each idea as it comes to me because I'm only using 1 or 2 minutes of my exam time to do this. And I know that once I start writing, I'll be able to reject any ideas that don't work. What do you think?
Now, it's really difficult for me to put myself into the position of a novice, which is in effect what you are. You need to decide how long it would take you to write this much. You don't want too much detail because then you'll have too many things to think about when you're writing. You just want enough for those close bits of focus, the zoom ins. So this is enough. It took me about 1 minute of thinking time, slightly longer because I'm working with a computer to try and write, which is, as you can see, not entirely successful. However, you need to find a balance for yourself. Your maximum planning time is 3 minutes because you get no marks for your plan, you only get marks for what you write. The advantage of the plan is so that you don't run out of ideas. Once you get good at this, you don't have to plan at all. You don't even have to annotate the picture. But that's when you become more expert. That's what we're working towards. And the most important thing about this planning stage is that no idea is too stupid. If it comes into your brain, stick it down. Once you're writing, you might find that some of these ideas you don't bother to use. Hey, that's no problem, is it? You've still come up with a better idea while you're writing. So do not listen to that voice in your head which says, no, this is a rubbish idea, it won't get me any marks. Just put it down and then trust the writing process. Your brain will already be thinking of better ways to treat that same idea in a different format. Okay, the next step, as you know, is to adapt my pre-prepared description of the weather. So here are my 2 paragraphs about the weather, and in bold you can see where I've adapted it for the specific things in this picture. So I've got spreading fields, I've got grateful crops, I've decided that the wheat is golden, as you saw, and I'm going to write about it in waves because that links nicely to the idea of the sea that I had in my pre-prepared description. But now I've switched that so that the wheat is a shifting sea, and I've then got this idea that it could be welcoming the sky because it's waving. And because I've prepared them in advance, it's going to take me far less than 8 minutes to write. It's probably going to take me about 5 minutes to write this. Give yourself 8 if you like. So we've used up 3 and 8. That's 11 of our 45 minutes. And we've already written at least a fifth of the full answer just from memorising our description. So I've only got 4/5 left.
Okay, in this section, I'm just going to show you what I typed as I typed it, so that you can see the way I think. You don't have to watch this bit. In fact, I'll put a link in the video description below showing you a timestamp so that you can jump and skip this bit and go straight to where I explain what I've done. But for others, it will be really useful just to follow it as I'm writing it so that you can see how I'm thinking during my exam practice. You know, I actually did this live as an exam skill, and I tried to make it as realistic as possible.
Okay, it is worth explaining at this stage where I get my ideas from. Now, these ideas aren't planned, so I have to leave my mind open to association it can make. And just like you, I expect, I've got a lot of films rocking about in my brain, and the idea that came to me most quickly was from this film Coco. Now, I couldn't even remember the name of the film, but I did remember this kid going off in his Disney film and ending up meeting all his ancestors on the Day of the Dead. Now, why I thought of this is that students, 50% of the time, and I'm not joking, probably 50% of exam answers will include some sort of death, which is depressing. It annoys the hell out of examiners because they're adults and they don't think in terms of despair and death. But being a teenager, it's actually, I don't know if it's a biological thing or evolutionary, but it happens everywhere. And so you will be thinking about death, and the chances are you'll put it in your description and it will reduce your grade. So what I've tried to do is include the idea of death, but flip it so that it's a really positive thing, just like Disney did. And you know, Disney earn millions from thinking of ideas that are going to work. So why wouldn't I steal a Disney idea? I know it's going to work. Now, this also led me to think of the TV program Vikings. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's an extremely violent portrayal of how the British Isles were partly conquered by the Vikings, and it's full of death and killing. So I thought of that, obviously, because I was thinking about death and killing, but I didn't want to include death and killing in my description. Instead, I started thinking about the Norse gods and the faith that these people had. And so before I got bored with this program, because it was just too violent, I really did get quite interested in the way that they did everything communally. They all sat in wooden log rooms, great halls, where they got together as families to celebrate their gods and their victories. And I've just switched that so that they're celebrating their ancestors and their past. Now, again, I didn't have to plan any of this. All I had to do was leave my mind open to other influences and thoughts. And because it's a description that you're writing, it really helps if you think visually, and that will link you to films and TV that you like. Now, I must point out here that if I choose the story of a film or the story of the TV, I'm going to end up with a rubbish description. So I'm just stealing the idea. Right, now my job is to read through what I've written to see if there are mistakes that I can spot, and possibly, more importantly, any improvements that I can add in. I'm not going to reread this description because I've already checked it. Hopefully you've watched it in another video. Beneath the flatness of the sky stood a dark barn, its wooden planks weathered by storm, sunshine and memory. I like this listing of three. It's something I'm going to do all the way through, and that gives my writing a bit of structure. It dominated the horizon, small though it was, in the way that a black hole sucks in light and matter from space and propels them into the unknown. Yeah, I like the idea of the black hole. It fits with my idea of death. But also we don't know what death is. It might not be frightening. The family glided towards it as Columbus must have done, carving the familiar seas to find a new world, golden, pure and free. Yep, I like that repetition of three. That works. I like the idea that we're going on a journey of discovery like Columbus. We're going to see death in a different way. A still figure stood to welcome them unseen. Strange to our senses, perhaps, but they felt his presence, the ancestor. Yeah, giving it a capital shows this is something special. I'm entering into a slightly different world that I have to explain very briefly as I go along, but explanation's going to get in the way of description, so just capitalising it lets the reader know that we're entering a slightly different world. Okay. His smile, though invisible, was warm, Okay, I haven't explained that this is probably a ghost-like figure, but the reader's getting a sense of it because it's invisible, whereas if it's warm, you'd obviously see a proper smile. So they are asking, how can it be warm and invisible? They're starting to think of the possibility of something supernatural, perhaps. He stood on hallowed ground, and within the barn the ancestors stirred. They fidgeted in their seats, hoping for sweet wines. Their empty mouths salivated for even sweeter cakes. Their long dead hearts beat afresh with love and hope. Okay, I've got that rhythm of 3 going again, which I'm really happy about. I've remembered I've got to use a colon. That's good. I've introduced a list, which is also an explanation, so that colon's right. I've also shown off my semicolons by separating long things in the list. So the examiner's going tick, 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 get marks for varied punctuation, job done. The family were coming. Okay, now I've remembered that I need to use short sentences at the end of paragraphs. Can I add a short sentence here? Possibly not. Oh, I know, the examiners like a 1-sentence paragraph, so I'm just going to put that on its own, and that really makes this a standout event. So the family coming is going to be important. Yes, that fits my story. I can keep that paragraph there. Let's have a look. The youngest, Maisie, ran hardest. Yeah, I like this contrast. So we've gone from the ancestors, who we assume are dead, to the youngest. That's a nice little contrast. I like the name Maisie. I don't know if you've picked this up, but maize is another word for corn. That works for me. That's just how it's come to me. It doesn't matter how you come up with a name, but this is one that some readers will get because they'll know that maize is corn. She would see Grandma again. A memory suddenly sprung to life like a picture in a child's pop-up book. Yeah, I like that simile because she is a child, and when you open up the pop-up, that actually is a bit of a surprise and it's delightful, and that's how she'd feel seeing her grandma. That's a simile that works. Fully coloured in, vibrant, as if alive. Oh, cool. I remembered to keep going with that pattern of 3 again. I'm really pleased. Maisie knew she could shut her eyes and feel her grandma's words. She'd taste her love in the very air. Yeah, I keep training myself to do that so that, particularly with taste, you taste something that you can't actually taste, tasting love. And I've taken that same idea with feeling. You'd normally hear words, but feeling them. So using the senses in this unexpected way is going to cause a bit of a surprise for the reader, and it somehow makes it feel more rich. I like that. I'm going to keep it. Behind her came her parents, slowly holding hands, the way lovers do when they're walking towards a future happy and golden bright. Okay, I like the idea of gold being picked up from the corn. I've got an adverb there. I always tell my students not to use adverbs. Can I keep this one? Is it important that I slow down? Well, okay, because it does create a contrast with the daughter Maisie, who you remember was running. And this makes us ask why the parents are so calm, and it shows that they're not afraid that their daughter is charging towards this barn that's full of ancestors who we assume are dead. So on balance, I'm probably going to keep it. Through the bread basket of the cornfields, through the stillness of the day, through the whispers of the corn, they floated towards the barn. Yeah, I like that. It's got that rhythm of 3 again, and I'm starting to think about the sounds of my words, and I'm using sibilants, the S's of cornfields, stillness, whispers. It's creating a peaceful sound, which does actually fit what I'm doing here. I want a peaceful setting. Okay. No sound came from the ancestors within, no scent of upturned earth and melting flesh from a place of fear, just the certain hope of memory. Yeah, okay, I like the, I'm really pleased that I remembered to put the no, just sentence in. That's really cool. Now, this is a bit melodramatic. No scent of upturned earth and melting flesh from a place of fear. Probably if I'm going to rewrite that, it would be because it's a bit melodramatic, isn't it? But because I'm rejecting that melodrama, saying that's not there, that does work with my description. Magnus and Matilda entered last. Okay, I quite like the idea that my names begin with the same letter. It stops me having to think too much, and that's also a structural feature. It links things together. And introducing the name Magnus is going to allow me to introduce the idea of the Norse ancestors and the Norse gods, because this is a Norwegian name, a Scandinavian name. So yeah, that's going to work. Shutting the oak doors softly as though not to wake a sleeping child. Oh look, there's an adverb again, but the softly does work here because it explains that they're again trying to do this really gently. It's not what we expect. So on balance, I'm going to allow the adverb, and the simile works as though not to wake a sleeping child. Instead, they're waking the dead, and that's a contrast which I like. And then the family set to work with joy. Another colon just to show that one off again, and so I'm going to have another listed explanation. Tablecloths like sails whipped from the sea. I like that simile because it takes us back to the Columbus image that I started with earlier, and that was obviously in my mind when I was writing, and it fits. Flapped onto tables. So a bit of an extended metaphor now, because the flapping of the sails works, and also flapping it onto a table works. Baskets opened like treasure chests. Got a sort of pirate image going, which sort of fits with Columbus. So another structural feature which works. Overflowing with golden honey. Yeah, another metaphor. So that you'd have gold coming from treasure chest, but here the gold is food. Still warm bread, soft as a baby's crown. Yeah, really pleased with that. I happen to think, having had babies of my own, that they do smell like fresh bread. But you don't need that. It's to link back to the idea of the sleeping child, to the idea of family and ancestors. And then the crown is a name for the head, but the crown is also what you put on a king or queen, and it's often golden. So that works really nicely. Fruits tumbling out like juggling balls, crimson apples, rusty pears, sharp emerald gooseberries, and the young fresh blood of strawberries. Yeah, I knew I needed to put colours in, so I've done that in an interesting way with crimson and rusty and sharp emerald. I'm really happy with that. I've got 3 fruits, so I've got my pattern of 3 going. Then I got overexcited and put in number 4 strawberries, but that does work with the idea of fresh blood. Blood here is not as in threatening, but as in delightful. And just like the young Maisie is fresh blood, the family are fresh blood to the family. That doesn't make sense, does it? To the ancestors. So that works. Right, well that means I've done all my zooms in, and now I've got to do the final zoom out, which you remember links to the weather. So I'm going back to the sky again, which was in my opening description of the weather. So this now gives me a nice circular structure, which the examiners will love. Outside, the sky was flat, plain, unremarkable. Again, my pattern of 3 going through. Almost a disappointment. Now I've got a contrast with the happiness that was within the barn. Within, the family began to sing the old song, with the Viking words they no longer fully understood. From the weathered walls the ancestors joined in, living again, breathing in the sacred words, feeling again the Norse gods rising within them. Okay, I like that. So now the reader has fully understood what's going on here. They realise that these are dead ancestors that go all the way back to the Viking times, and this is some sort of family tradition that's giving them some sort of power. Every solstice, at the harvest, the family would come, as salmon do. Ooh, road capital. Yeah, I don't think salmon is going to have a capital because it's not a proper name. As salmon do, drawn to the sacred flow of the river. Ooh, I've repeated the word sacred, but that does work because I'm reinforcing the idea that this is somehow a natural process that's in the natural world like salmon. And actually, what if people behaved in that same sort of evolutionary way? Right, I'm going to keep it. To the very spot where they were born. Yeah, that works perfectly. So this simile linking the family to the salmon works all the way through. They're being drawn back to this ancestral barn. I've got to end with the contrast. That's my job. So after the laughter, each of the family sat silent, their heads filled with the old memories, tragedies and hopes, which now lived on in stories which would carry them through winter. Round the fire in the freezing nights, they would share their tales. A rich harvest. Right, cool. I'm really pleased with this because I've got a lovely contrast. I've got a short sentence at the end of the paragraph. That's also a metaphor. So the stories are a harvest, which is a contrast to the corn, which was a harvest at the time. And I've also got a lovely contrast of the future. So we've got this lovely sunny weather, but now we're looking forward to the future when the nights are going to be freezing. It's going to be winter. And they'll be sharing their stories. And that links back to the ancestors. And it shows us how the ancestors are going to live on, not in some spooky, haunting, ghosty sort of way, but actually in the stories that the children and the family remember, that have been handed down spiritually in this barn as the ancestors have given them their experiences, their tragedies and hopes of life. Now, I haven't had to explain all of that. I've just done it with these allusions. So it's been quite difficult to show you lots of redraftings. To do that, I would have had to fake the story, the description I mean. And the difficulty is that I am an expert, so I can do it quite well first time. However, the process is important to demonstrate to you. And I've started to show you the kinds of questions I ask myself and the thinking I do when I'm rereading the story or description. But all the time I'm trying to keep this checklist in my head when I'm rereading, also when I'm writing. So I've memorised the weather at the beginning, I've used that, I've used the no, just sentence, I've used the beneath the sky sentence, I've had a semicolon and a colon, so I'm happy with that. Yes, I've used contrast throughout. I have avoided the animal imagery most of the time, although I used salmon, because I know no one else is going to do that in the exam and it's not a cliche. The examiner won't have heard that one before. I've got lots of memories going in there, that's good. Sibilance, I didn't draw that out when I was reading it to you, but there is quite a bit of it, lots of S's. I've definitely used the colour vocabulary, I'm well chuffed. Yes, you saw me use taste as an abstract noun, and I also used feeling with an abstract noun as well. At the end I did contrast with the weather, well done. Did I have a final couple of lines which brought us back to the present? No, I changed the time to the future. But that works because it's still a contrast of time. I ended with a short sentence, hooray, and I've consciously crafted my writing by going back to see what I could improve. And I hope I've done that with an image which isn't very exciting, which you would have looked at and thought, what ideas have I got there? And this bit was interesting for me. I didn't know this would happen when I started, but you saw how few things I wrote on my picture, and I didn't actually need all of them. So I didn't use the idea of the mother and daughter wearing the same clothes being some kind of traditional uniform, and I didn't think about these dark imprints that could have been left by the ancestors. I didn't need it. So this confirms for me that you don't need to write much on your picture. You don't need to spend long on the plan. You just need some ideas that will start you off, and bosh, off you go. So hopefully that model answer will propel you towards the grades that you want. Give it a go yourself. Post your answers in the comments below so that other people can comment on them, and so might I. Don't forget to subscribe. See you soon on my channel.